Welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. I am your host, Steve McAllister. Well, as we've been documenting in every newsletter since pretty much the beginning of the new year, and in conversations with our guests on this podcast, an expanded regulated sports betting and gaming industry is coming to Alberta. Since news landed from Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis in January that the application process was ready to be rolled out, the biggest brands in the gambling game, many of them currently operating in Ontario's open market, have pretty much been unanimous in indicating they'll be participants in the Western Canadian province's new model. Dan Keene has quickly earned the respect of industry stakeholders as the point person for the incoming Alberta market. Keene served on the gaming side of AGLC for more than 13 years before being appointed interim CEO of the new Alberta iGaming Corporation in January. And today he makes his maiden appearance on the Gaming News Canada show. Hey, Dan, welcome to the podcast, and thanks so much for joining me.
Steve, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Hey, Dan, I just want to start. We're recording this the last week of the Olympics, and I'm thinking that you maybe you don't associate this with hurling down a mountain at 120 kilometers an hour like an alpine skier, but there probably is some synergies with what you and the staff at AiGC are experiencing right now, and along with the people at AGLC.
Yeah, I was watching a clip of a celebrity that did the bobsled the other day, Steve, and they sort of articulated that they thought all their limbs were going to leave their body. No, it hasn't been quite that parallel with the Alberta iGaming Corporation. Obviously, we've got a lot of things underway, and we're excited for the momentum that we're building. And happy to speak to you about it today, Steve.
Hey, what's your life been like since that meeting on January 13th? And, it's funny. I went down on my computer before I went to bed that night, and there was a LinkedIn post from Iran and Alon Segev with a link to the AGLC website with the process to take a look at applying to join the marketplace. And that was following, I think, a call between you and Dale Nally, the Minister of Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction, with I think about 100 stakeholders on a Tuesday night, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And obviously the news coming out a lot more the next morning that you were moving ahead with this market. I just wonder how are things been since then?
Well, obviously, as you can imagine, Steve, there is, as I mentioned, a lot of momentum and a lot of excitement, and obviously thrilled to be appointed interim CEO and underneath Minister Dale Nally's mandate, of course, and Bill 48 to stand up and operationalize the Alberta iGaming Corporation and the Alberta iGaming market in consultation with stakeholders, of course, and our friends at AGLC as the regulator. And what it's been like, Steve, as you can imagine, is it's been busy. It's been busy, but exciting busy, right? Because you can feel that we're building a lot of momentum. We're getting a lot of positive work done. We're excited about the responsibility gaming framework that we're going to put in place, along with the engagements that are upcoming with operators. So there's just been a lot of activity, Steve. And as you can imagine, right, building and setting up and having the pleasure of being involved with establishing this Crown Corporation, there's been no shortage. No shortage of activity and meetings going on, but it's been tremendous.
And in terms of hiring, Dan, I just wonder, so far, the people from what kinds of sectors you're hiring from, and still, I assume you're still looking to beef up the staff at the corporation.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And public knowledge that we have published postings, if you will, for the C-level positions, and they are as follows. A position we're calling the CCOO, which would be the Chief Compliance Operations Officer. And underneath that position would be the responsibility for AML, which is, of course, absolutely critical as the operating mind and our mutual duties between our operators and ourselves to report into FinTrack. But also underneath that position would be our human resources and our account engagement team, along with our communications team. So a pretty diverse portfolio underneath that position. And then a CIO position. Of course, critical from an IT side of things and cybersecurity and whatnot, CFO, and a general counsel position. So those positions are posted and the interviews are well underway, actually. In addition to, Steve, you might have seen we posted on LinkedIn 2 director roles. One was for director AML and the other was director of HR. I would expect, obviously, more positions to follow. We want to have the great folks that we bring in, and we're looking to bring in folks that are very diverse, right, and very business oriented, but also have a good understanding of the compliance and the legal requirements to do what we need to do as a corporation. But we're looking for a diverse team, and we're underway. We're underway with recruitment, and I would expect that team, once in place, Steve, we're going to empower that team to build their own team, if you will, right, and continue to flush out what the corporation looks like.
I think, one thing that we talked about a lot on the podcast, Dan, and have written about in the newsletter over the past 5 years, is just the opportunities there are to work in this industry. And we have seen, so many stories of people working in the banking industry, for example, to move over to the gaming industry. Obviously, you mentioned a legal counsel, and there's certainly a need for legal beagles to work in this industry as well. And I would think, the movement will be there will be people with previous experience in the gaming industry like yourself who will find a role here. But there also are those opportunities for someone who might be looking for a change in the current industry they're working in to move into this industry.
Yeah, I think that's right, Steve. And we're proud to be working alongside AGLC as the regulator, but AiGC is the conduct and manage entity, as we know, and the operating mind for iGaming in Alberta. And I see, if I have the pleasure to continue with this organization, I see the goal is to work in partnership. Is to work in partnership with our stakeholders. And as such, we need a diverse team. Look, I had a great and great experience and tremendous opportunities at AGLC on the gaming side, but I'm also from the private sector. I had the pleasure of working for another tremendous organization, Century Casino, for over 5 years, who have diverse operations across the globe. And then before that, I worked for Molson Breweries for 8 years in 4 different provinces. So I like to think I have a good mix of the private sector along with the government side. And frankly, for our team that we're putting together, we're looking for that sort of mix. We want people with diverse backgrounds, and we want folks that have a good, sensible business approach, but also have the regulatory and the legal background to be able to do what we need to do from an integrity side of things, Steve. So, yeah, it's exciting to be part of assembling that group.
Yeah, I want to go back to 2007 and the decision you made back then to leave Molson and join Century Casino, and then obviously that led you down a path to eventually joining AGLC. I just wonder, what was it that attracted you to the gaming industry back then, and your decision obviously be sitting here 19 years later?
Well, it's interesting, Steve. I don't talk about that maybe too much, but obviously I had a very exciting and great run with Molson Breweries. Like I said, 4 different provinces. I spent time out east. I worked as district manager, Toronto Core. So I actually looked after the sales department in downtown Toronto. I looked after or worked with the team. Of course, it wasn't just me, in the province of Saskatchewan as area sales manager. And I worked on Vancouver Island, and I worked in Alberta. And it's a little interesting. I think it was more of a product of, like a lot of people have been through this in their careers. You move around a lot. And then they'd ask me when I was in Calgary, do you want to move back to Edmonton? I'm like, no more moves. And then, of course, I ended up back in Edmonton anyway. But, so I had a great run there. And then obviously the casino industry, when I had the chance to join Century, it really intrigued me. I'll just say from a personal level, my late father was, let's just say, enthusiastic about the gaming industry, and always had a passion for it myself, and like a lot of things in life, right? You get attracted to things that you think you know about, or at least things that you're interested in, and that sort of led me to that career. And I like the diversity, Steve, in our industry. The gaming industry, for people that get into it, I think understand that it's incredibly diverse in terms of the different things that you can do. Obviously, you've got a lot of IT, you've got a lot of product, you've got a lot of marketing, you've got a lot of regulatory pieces that are all intertwined with gaming. So it's incredibly diverse, that industry. I think people from the outside might look at it and say, wow, it's just gambling. And it couldn't be further from the truth, right? There's a lot of core business elements and different divergent pieces that come into play in the gaming industry that are incredibly fascinating.
Hey, I want to talk just about the process to get to this point, Dan, and I know you've been you probably have a pretty good frequent flyer program going right now with attending the various conferences over the past 18 to 24 months. And I was hoping you could just talk a little bit about the feedback and the input you have had from operators and suppliers and getting to this stage.
Well, first, I would like to credit and thank our friends in Ontario because they've been absolutely tremendous, and they've set the template. And the Alberta iGaming Corporation wouldn't be in a place it is today without the great consultation and support we've had from Ontario. So it's the first thing I would say, Steve. The second thing I would say was a call out, of course, the Canadian Gaming Association, Paul Burns and that team there have been instrumental in helping us understand what has gone on, what is potential to happening, and just been a great resource in terms of helping and support us. And then, of course, many of the lobbyists that we deal with have been tremendous as well, along with our engagement with stakeholders. Had the pleasure of meeting many of them at ICE Barcelona, and we're going to continue that, Steve. That's not a one and done, right? I know enough to know that when it comes to this industry, and we've seen that, we've got many emerging things happening in this industry, whether it's shared liquidity, whether it's prediction markets, whatever it is, right, that is forthcoming. So maintaining those relationships and maintaining those partnerships, Steve, as we go forward are going to be absolutely critical to our mutual success.
Hey, Dan, the Ontario market, it has received high praise from operators for that willingness to have conversations and accept the feedback. A cynic might look at that where it's the tail wagging the dog, but it feels to me like you need to have that input, and you can take that feedback and at the same time put teeth in your regulations. And we've seen it here recently in Ontario where the AGCO has taken fairly significant action against both FanDuel and PointsBet Canada for what they felt was wrong activity.
Well, listen, I can't speak for AGLC as the regulator. I know they'll do a tremendous job in terms of what they need to do. We're going to work in partnership with them. But as far as listening to the industry, as I mentioned, it's critical, Steve. Look, there's going to be times when we disagree. There's going to be times when we have things and policies that we put in place for the rationale and the determinations that we make. And we will do that with full transparency when we can. And we will do that in a consultative way when we can. And there'll also be times when I'm sure that we'll receive feedback and we may pivot based on what's best for the mutual side of industry, with always an eye towards the integrity, towards the responsible gaming mandate that Minister is giving us, towards the fact that we're doing this for Albertans. We're doing this for the benefit of Albertans. We're doing this to deliver a certain amount of revenue and security and integrity behind what we're doing. I've heard ministers say many times we're not in this to grow iGaming. We're in this to channel what's currently the illegal market and the market that exists today over to a regulated market, along with having world-class social responsibility tools, including the centralized self-exclusion. So, but Steve, there'll be times when, AiGC has to make decisions that I'm sure won't always be beloved necessarily by industry, but we're going to do our absolute best to keep lines of communication open and keep our ears open too, because it is a mutual, it's a mutual, it's in our mutual benefit for all of us, right?
Is your iGaming platform ready for Alberta? Bede Gaming is ready to support your new market entry with a SOC 2 compliant platform, multi-tenant infrastructure model, and unlimited configurability. Future-proof your iGaming performance today with a solid foundation for your next province. Bede Gaming is your partner for success. Get in touch at bedegaming.com. You mentioned the conversations with the folks in Ontario who created the market and are now running the market here, and there's obviously a benefit for AiGC and AGLC to watch what's happened in Ontario for the better part of 5 years now, which includes the process getting to launch in April 2022. I think Paul Burns has talked about this. Other people I talk to in the industry, they talk about self-exclusion, and we've reported on it frequently that iGaming Ontario has been a bit of a slow road to get a centralized self-exclusion program up and running. We saw an avalanche of advertising out of the gate, and I want to ask you in a second about that as well. But are there one or two big lessons that you've learned, or again, being able to have the benefit of seeing what's happened in Ontario and make sure that certain policies are tailored so you don't have a repeat of what happened in Ontario?
Well, I think that's it, Steve, to some degree. Listen, I think you'll find where we want to adopt the Ontario approach. It's been globally incredibly successful. So we're not interested in trying to make change for change's sake. What we are, our duties, our fiduciary and our legal and our regulated duties will predicate us having to do certain things that are Alberta and for Alberta. We have some different things, for example, around privacy. We have new legislation around POPA with privacy. So some of these things by legislation are going to be different, but we're not searching out and seeking to do things differently just because. Ontario has done an incredible job. And as I mentioned earlier, Steve, people like Paul Burns, people like Troy Ross, people like the companies that we work with are providing invaluable support and resources to facilitate what we need to do. But yeah, we're spending a lot of time, of course, where we can, piggybacking, if you will, off Ontario. But it'll be Alberta. It'll be Alberta-ized for Albertans, of course, for a number of reasons.
Yeah, and in fairness to iGaming Ontario, I mean, that organization continues to evolve too. I mean, there's a new Joseph Hilliard, the new CEO, has been on board for less than a year. We had the news a couple of weeks ago that Ben Valitos left the AGCO and joined iGO as its first chief responsible gaming officer. So that group continues to evolve as well, and you have to in an industry and we're really seeing that in the US right now, Dan, where that industry right there is evolving at a laser-like pace with, as you mentioned earlier, with prediction markets, and there's still a push to get more legalized iGaming in states across the US. So this is an industry we talk about technology and crypto, and this is an industry that's moving at a very fast pace globally right now.
Yeah, and that's it, Steve, right? I think and I would be the first to put up my hand saying I don't know everything that's going on in the industry. I'm not sure if anybody does, but we need to have our ears and our eyes open, and we also have to be open to being able to flex when we need to flex, right? Because of just how fast the industry moves. But yeah, I think the points you raised are really critical, and I'll just reiterate. I mean, Ontario couldn't be more gracious in their support of what we've been trying to do, and but at the same time, it's Alberta, it's Alberta's mandate and Minister Nally's mandate that, of course, I'm have the pleasure of adhering to and trying to deliver on, along with the team that we'll put together. So.
Hey, Dan, something I asked Paul Burns on the last podcast was just the interest in the Alberta market, and I've heard many times that this market is going to be quite a bit smaller than Ontario, but you look like it just feels to me that every big brand right now, and we've had financial earnings put out the last 2 or 3 weeks by Rush Street Interactive and BetMGM. Caesars, DraftKings, Bede indicated almost immediately that it was committed to coming to Alberta. So it does seem like there's a lot of activity already. Like, do you have any sense of what the market's going to look like in terms of numbers on day one?
Well, I'll say this, Steve. I can't comment on the amount of registrants or interest. I know there's been a lot of interest, to your point, Steve, to date, which we're really excited about. And I will say this, Alberta is an incredibly strong economic engine with incredibly high disposable income. Look, anything we do is going to be rooted in social responsibility. We're not here to grow the gaming market. We're here to channel people over that are interested in playing responsibly over to the legal market. So I want to be clear about that. Responsibility, Minister has made that very clear. Social responsibility is the key pillar to what we're doing. And I completely align with that. But if we talk about Alberta in general, we do have high interprovincial immigration. We have an extremely strong economy in Alberta. We're very business oriented and business friendly. We welcome open competition, and we will facilitate and support that. But Albertans enjoy gambling. Those that do choose to participate and do so responsibly do so in a healthy entertainment fashion. And that's what we want to encourage, Steve, is folks that are engaged in that. It's entertainment, right? Instead of maybe going to a movie every week, maybe you decide you want to engage in the casino business. Those are the types of consumers we want that are using their game sense and using their tools, the social responsibility tools that are available. But there's no doubt that we have a strong marketplace, Steve, and I think those companies are making the right decision.
Yeah, and that marketplace also includes your land-based casinos, and obviously your First Nations communities have a big stake in that. Dan, I like to ask, like, what does AiGC have a role with the land-based casinos in this new environment?
Well, I would say that you touched on First Nation. Of course, the way that we've structured our revenue with 2% to First Nation and 1% to social responsibility right off the top is critical, and also part of Minister's very appropriate mandate, in my opinion. And we will continue to consult with Indigenous nations and our ministry in that regard. And as far as other stakeholders, I do believe that AiGC will always play a role with all impacted stakeholders, be it the online stakeholders or the land-based stakeholders, Steve. It's critical. You know, the ecosystems work together. They work together. And many, from what I understand, of land-based providers are expressing interest in joining the iGaming space. So by extension, we will have a role in supporting their efforts, in enforcing our own policies and our own requirements for responsible gaming with these providers. So in short, yes.
You mentioned the tax rate, which I think is a really important piece of what you're creating here, and especially in light of what we're seeing in the U.S. right now, where states are hiking. You know, we're seeing tax rates doubled in some places. There's a proposal by the UK government to I think more than double the tax rate there. I assume there was a lot of conversation around establishing a tax rate that served the needs of the province, and at the same time was going to be attractive for people to do business here.
Yeah, I wasn't part, Steve, of the development of the tax rate. That was decided by our Minister of Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction, Dale Nally, and our cabinet and our premier in consultation, I know, throughout many, many months and years. So I'll simply say that. But look, I think the idea is to repatriate funds for Albertans and create an industry that can flourish competitively and provide the security that for Albertans' wallets and transactions, and provide leading world-class responsible gaming tools that and services that Albertans can rely on.
Hey, Dan, on the advertising piece, I think something that got addressed pretty quickly by the AGCO was, I think a year plus into the market, they took a stand against the use of athletes in commercials, and there was quite a backlash because of the avalanche of advertising. And again, some of that I think was tied to what gets forgotten sometimes, is that we were still not quite coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there were media companies that really benefited from having that additional revenue from a new industry come in. But I know when you look at the rules and regulations that have been put into place in Alberta, that advertising is addressed, and there will be some changes from what there was in Ontario when the market launched here 4 years ago.
Well, I think what I'll say about advertising, Steve, is rules and standards for advertising have been published by the AGLC, and many of the elements that are in Ontario are going to be in Alberta, around use of celebrities for social responsibility, for not targeting minors, for all the very appropriate pieces that are in place. And beyond that, companies are here to compete. And what we want to do from an AiGC standpoint, Steve, and I think you will see from the AiGC, we want to let Albertans know that when you see the AiGC logo on these advertisings, that you're playing securely, and you're playing with world-class providers, and you're playing with your funds are secured and with integrity. And by the way, when you see the AiGC logo, that a portion of those funds are staying to support Albertans to build schools, roads, and hospitals and fill potholes, and also support the very critical elements of responsible gaming from a research, education, and prevention side of things, which are absolutely critical to what we're doing. So when it comes to advertising, that's what AiGC is going to be focused on, is telling the very factual Alberta story that, look, this industry is not new, Steve. I don't partake in the online space anymore, but I'll just say I had my first account probably, 2 decades ago in Alberta. Okay, so these sites aren't new. These companies aren't new to Albertans and to Alberta. What they will be is channelized to a regulated marketplace, which has parameters and securities and regulations that have been built with industry and from an Alberta perspective, and some of the funds from this operation now will go to our general revenue fund in Alberta.
Hey, Dan, last question. And again, we do have listeners on this podcast who don't spend a lot of time on the gaming industry, but just for those people, if you can just explain a little bit on the supplier application and who are those suppliers, and how different are the rules around that sector compared to the operators?
Steve, I can't speak too much to that simply because AGLC is doing the registration of the operators and the suppliers. I encourage folks to visit aglc.ca to learn all about the registration. The team over there is absolutely incredible, and I know that they'll only be supportive of any of the questions and queries that come from both suppliers and operators. Look, once that process gets complete and a due diligence handshake is agreed to, once AGLC approves it, come over the fence and come see us at the AiGC. We're going to have some engagements coming up in the next weeks and months around our own operating agreement and policies, which we'll share in consultation with industry, and then we'll welcome the next steps in the process.
Hey, Dan, I'd be negligent if I didn't ask you this, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I'll ask it anyway. Any thoughts on a launch date?
Well, we started off, Steve, by talking about momentum, right? Momentum behind what we're doing, and certainly all the work that was done pre myself joining the organization. I can't thank people that were involved in that enough, because now all the hard work AGLC's put in with their standards being published and registrations are starting, and the regulations coming out, Steve, look, I would say don't wait. We're targeting a spring summer launch, and there's just tremendous momentum that's happening. So stay tuned.
That is Dan Keene, the interim chief executive officer of the Alberta iGaming Corporation. Hey, Dan, thanks so much for doing this. Love to get you back on when we get a little closer to the launch date, but we'll definitely stay in touch with you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Steve, and thanks to the industry. And we look forward to welcoming you to Alberta.
And just to reiterate what Dan said, if you're looking for more information on the registration process in Alberta, go to aglc.ca. That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada Show presented by Bede Gaming. Thanks again to Dan Keene for being our guest. You can listen to this podcast on all the various podcast apps. You can also watch our interview with Dan on the Gaming News Canada YouTube channel. Thanks again to all of our listeners and viewers, and we will see everybody again very, very soon.